Alright, so I got a couple of key ingredients here. This is a genuine oil feed line for the L28AT or 280ZX Turbo. And then this little, I don't know what you call it, little T-fitting for the high pressure oil that goes in front of the sensor. Of course, I'm not going to be using this sensor because it's probably shot after who knows how many years. You can tell it was leaking at one point, which typically means they're bad. But yeah, it's nice to have a good, genuine hard line that I won't have to worry about coming loose and spraying all over the damn place like a rubber one. Alright, so of course that oil line comes off of the T-block, is what I'm going to call it there. Wraps around the back side of the engine. This apparently goes on the back of the transmission to just skirt it in, but that's obviously, I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. I guess I'm going to have to flip, oh yeah, I'll just flip it up like that when I put the tranny back on. So that, then it wraps around, bolts onto a couple places on the intake manifold, and then right into the turbo. Both the manifolds are installed now and all fastened in. The turbo manifold went on pretty nice. Everything made it up very, very well. There's plenty of clearance on the manifolds between each other. Of course, I got the manifold wraps, so the bolts that secure both manifolds in it that kind of share a mount are definitely a bit challenging to get in, to get past all that wrap. But other than that being a bitch, everything else is pretty good. One thing I noticed, the Pcv valve comes out right here on top of the coupler for the charge pipe. And obviously that's not going to clear, so what I've done is I've ordered a couple elbows. I've ordered a 9-degree elbow and then a 45. I'm going to have the PC valve come out right here and then have the hose basically attach, well, I'm going to have to bend it up, but attached like that. That way I'll have a working PCV system so I can pass smog. The EGR matched up absolutely perfect. So if you're using all the factory manifolds when you're doing the same conversion, your EGR tube from the turbo manifold will work perfectly fine. Didn't have to bend it or anything. And of course, remember to use anti-season in case you ever have to remove it again. But one thing that's very surprising that I noticed is my less than a year-old injectors. The hoses are already cracking and coming apart after not even a year, about 10 months of use and maybe, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 miles. So that is very surprising because these look honestly worse than the original ones that came off of this thing that were, you know, roughly 31 years old when I got the car. So that's kind of a bitch. These are these weird press-fitted deals on the injectors, so I'm going to have to pop each one of these caps off and just put in replacement hoses that are cut to size from the hardware store. So that's kind of disappointing for sure, but luckily everything else is going quite smoothly. Also, on your NA cars you'll have a weird module here called the boost control deceleration device. It has something to do with helping the engine rev hang so the throttle's not so sharp when you take your foot off the gas. I don't think this was ever working because the throttle was instantly jerky whenever I took my foot off the gas. So I ordered a little plate from Godzilla Raceworks that I'm going to slap on here and delete that up with. Of course I'll have to block off this idle hose, but I'm going to try to keep all the idle hardware relatively the same. The one catch is going to be how the idle air control system is going to work with the charge pipe here. Because as you can see, this is the port that you use that goes to the idle air control valve on the turbo engine. And the idle comes out over here on the NA. So I'd like to keep all this crazy shit here because you cannot find these parts whatsoever. So what I'm thinking is I'm just going to get a U pipe. This is I think it's a 5/8 inch. And just get an elbow and have it come all the way back here, or even just have it elbow off of this directly, use a silicone piece, and just kind of hook it up in a little U fashion, and then that should suffice. But this isn't really important for Megasquirt because it's used a MAP sensor. So even if I had this thing just running open, it's not going to make a difference because, like I said, it's, you know, a manifold absolute pressure. There's no MAP sensor or anything that's going to cause unregistered air to dick up the mixture. So that should be pretty easy to figure out. Alright, so as far as these injector hoses go, I got the first one off, and I mean, yeah, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. I asked some people on a 280ZX Facebook page, and they think whoever sold this to me, company give me non-ethanol hoses. I think the ethanol content in the fuel just started eating away at the hose from the inside. From the inside, it doesn't look too bad, but I mean, cracked fuel hoses are cracked fuel hoses, so those are going bye-bye, and luckily these caps just pop off real easily. So I'm going to do the other 5, and then I'm actually not going to be using the PALNet rail. Reason being is I got a few opinions, and that's not going to pass smog. Even if I tell them it was a direct generic replacement, it's just not going to go over well. So I will be putting my stock fuel rail back on. However, if you're not in California, I would definitely recommend the PALNet fuel rail because it's very easy to install. It doesn't leak. It's very simple, and of course it cleans up your engine bay. But just not going to be able to have that luxury here in California. Forgot I did was when I put the other fuel rail on, I put a spacer in between the bracket because this is where this mount sits. It's right in between here. But if I remember correctly, this stud was starting to strip when I was doing this whole thing, and that's not optimal. So I don't really want to take that off and dick with that whole thing again. So I think what I'm going to do instead is just straight up cut this little fucking bracket off, because to be honest with you, it's got 60 other brackets that are holding the fuel rail in place, and I don't think this is doing much. Plus it interferes with my manifold coolant bypass deal, and I do want to keep my manifold coolant bypass deal intact because it keeps my air intake temperature temps down. So I'm just going to get the damn saw real quick and cut this hoe right off. Well, before I get the rotisserie saw out and send sparks near fuel, see if I can cut it off with these bolt cutters here. Ooh, that might be working. Aha, okay. Well, that was pretty easy. Okay, well, we're coming to the final stages of reassembly here. I'm just changing my spark plugs now. This is what all 6 of the old ones look like, all burning pretty evenly. There are some hard deposits from all that two-stepping when people tailgate me, but other than that, everything looks really good. And I'm gapping the new spark plugs. Instead of the factory 43 thousandths of an inch, I'm gapping them to 30 thousandths of an inch because all that excessive compression and just pressure in general will blow out a spark with that big of a gap. So that will solve any potential issues regarding that. Of course, the manifold is all on and secure. Got the fuel rail on, and I have a cap on the way that I'm going to screw on the end of this barb fitting here with some little O-ring to stop fuel from shooting out the damn place. Other than that, everything is relatively the same. I'm going to run this to my blow-off valve. This is where the charcoal canister vent would normally go. However, on the turbo engines, let's see, where's the damn boot? This is going to be, on the turbo versions, the charcoal canister vent is routed to the intake duct, as well as the PCV. So that'll be changed there. This is what I did with the J pipe. Since I'm not going to be using this port here for idle air control, since it's a different manifold, I might just use this to mount my blow-off valve. This is the one that came in the box with the second 280ZX turbo I bought, so why not use it? I have a genuine Greddy Type S, but I'd have to get that welded on somewhere on the pipe, and this is just temporary to prevent compressor surge in the meantime of tuning. I'm getting the oil pan off to mount the oil return bung. What I did to just mark the area was I just literally spray painted around this tube. That way it shows a circle and I know where to drill. So this is pretty much half the reason why I took the engine out, because you can't really remove the oil pan without massive headaches with the engine in the car. So there's all kinds of bolts. There's something like 20-30 bolts that go all around the perimeter of the oil pan, as well as some brace plates that I have to remove. So that'll definitely be a bit time consuming, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright, not too bad. Alright, well, might as well take a look at the rod caps and the main bearings while they're exposed, make sure everything is in good health, which I'm sure it is. Alright, well, it's kind of hard to tell with all this oil, but everything is there. I don't see any abnormal discoloration. If the engine was ran a little oil sometime, these rod caps would be black at the bottom from heat discoloration, but I'm not noticing that. They're all still metally and such. And looks like the gasket is still on the block, and hopefully it doesn't tear off in pieces, because that would be a bitch, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. Well, and everything looks pretty good in here too. Some of this coating has started to come off, but that's not a big deal. Looks like there's still a decent amount of oil in there that I'll want to drain out, but overall, not too bad. Everything looks pretty decent. You can see this is the hole here where the oil drain is. So that's what will be drilled. And yeah, let's see if I can drain the rest of this oil out. Okay, so I think I'm just going to wing it like this. If I brace it against this thing, get her going real tight, and just hold it with one hand, it's not really going much of anywhere. So using precision instruments, I made a little dot right there in the center where I'm going to start my pilot hole. Because of course you want to be as close as you can, because the hose is only about 2 inches long, and there's not going to be a lot of room to flex if the deal is off center. Plus, if it is off center, then I'm dicked. It's my only oil pan I have here right now, so I have to make sure I'm very cautious with this and get it right the first time, or at least as close as possible. Sure, we're right on center here. Okay, well, I've got the bung all screwed in. Comes out all the way. Stripped these front threads here at first because the hole is a little bit too small, but it's good. It's flush, and it's not going to pop out whatsoever from any sort of crankcase pressure. But however, one thing I think I'm going to have to do is actually cut this a little shorter, because the way I'm looking at it, it's protruding out pretty far, and it's just about going to hit the barb on the drain tube. So I think I'm going to have to cut about 1 to 2 barbs off to make it so it fits perfectly. Okay, so I've got the engine tilted on the side here a little bit. I didn't want to go all the way flat or all the way upside down because the cylinder head and all the hardware is still on it. I don't want to put any strain on the head bolts or, you know, warp anything that doesn't need to be warped or unseat anything that doesn't need to be unseated. So it's about as far as I'm comfortable tilting this engine when it's complete. So I'm going to attempt to put the oil pan on. I know it's going to be a bitch lining that gasket up and everything because there are 50 holes, and you know, it's a cork gasket, so it wants to warp and bend and flop all over the damn place. So we'll see how we can do here. Okay, so the oil pan is back on and all the bolts are hand tight, and I gotta tell you, I've done a lot of shit on this car and I don't think anything was as hard as this. I mean, as stupid as it is, this was an absolute bitch to get on. You know, with one person, you know, holding the plates, holding the screws, the brace plates, and of course the whole pan at the same time while trying to turn something was just fucking crazy. And also making sure at the, you know, in addition, that the gasket was lined up with all the holes. So, I mean, fuck, I am glad that is over. So now, I'm going to turn my attention back to the bung, getting this JB welded in, and all sealed up. I got my whole PCV deal all figured out. Got the 2 angles here, 1/4 inch MPT. Everything in these manifolds is pipe threads, whether it's 1/8 inch, MPT 3/8, 1/4, whatever it is. It's all pipe shit. So I got that in there. The coupler rubs a little bit on this corner here, so I'm going to take the Dremel and just kind of smooth this out so it fits snug. But that's taken care of. But yeah, let's get this JB weld going on this bung. Let it sit overnight, and that should be it. Put oil in the damn thing and fucking throw it in the car. Alright, well it is the morning after, and that JB weld is hard and dry. I went over it with a couple thin coats of a high temp black paint just to kind of cover up the rust area so rust doesn't seep in from underneath and cause any integrity issues with the weld, so to speak. So that's all taken care of. I also grinded down my little fitting for the PCV, so now the J-pipe and coupling fits great. And also another thing I forgot to do earlier was the bracket that the airflow meter sat on, the stock airflow meter, would get in the way of the J-pipe, so I had to kind of chisel that off, and I have the area coated in 415 because there is some bare metal, and that will be coated with some paint as well. You can see this is the bracket. I mean, it was already kind of starting to rust away and stuff to begin with, as you can see, so not a huge loss. And I had a bunch of friggin' nuts stuck in it. So basically, got to fill this thing with oil, put the clutch on, and that is it. She's ready to go back in. Engine is off the stand, and now I'm going to be putting the clutch on. Like I mentioned earlier, the flywheel surface of this engine is extremely clean. I'm not going to resurface it because, I mean, there's a very slight discoloration evenly all the way around, a couple little very small bright spots, but I mean it's the best I've seen, and I've replaced clutches on flywheels that have been absolutely trash and it's held fine. So that's my justification for that. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off the mating surface. Alright, and if I didn't mention it before, the clutch I'm going with is a Center Force 2 225mm clutch. So stock diameter. My Center Force 1 I would swear by. That thing was excellent. Of course, we're going to be making, you know, a good 60 more horsepower. So I think this will suffice pretty well. Flywheel side. Oh, whoops. Gotta fucking do it this way. that thing in there. Just going to make sure you line up the pegs on the flywheel with the pressure plate to make sure that all lines up properly for proper balancing and fitting. Okay, looks like this is going to be the right one. Shove a bolt in it. I believe these bolts need to be torqued to like 15 foot-pounds. Alright, and with that done, bang! She's ready to go back into the car.